Elon is sparking more controversy by commenting on this. An American citizen is in prison in Ukraine after we sent over $100 billion, says Elon. Is there more to the story than simply criticizing Zelensky? If that's all it is, then we have a serious problem here, President Zelensky. Please educate the American people about this matter. The community note says that it is correct that this person, a self-promoted dating coach, was arrested in Ukraine for Russian propaganda. According to a law in Ukraine, promoting Russian propaganda is a criminal offense which could result in a prison sentence. Now, I like when Elon speaks up, but some Tesla stock investors are a bit concerned about this, certainly not Steven though. And yes, Alex Jones is now back on X, and he retweeted this post from Andrew that basically tells people to find a globalist and tell them to go low yourself. Joe Rogan says that Jones told him about Epstein's Island more than a decade ago. Now, Jones did have some crazy conspiracies too, of course. I'm not going to talk about some of these because, you know, the YouTube god then will make it so no one sees this video ever.
You're telling me there's a place where they bring elites to compromise them with underage girls and they film them? Really? Like, what? Get the fuck out of here.
Yeah.
Like, no, President Clinton's been there. Everyone's been there. Like, what? It sounds like nonsense. And not only is it true, but people keep getting murdered for it. Did you see that latest Clinton advisor that got murdered about it?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Hung with an extension cord, shot himself in the chest 30 miles from his house, and they're calling it a suicide.
And to those that say that there's no point in bringing back Jones on X, I would say, well, if he does say something, then community notes will be there under his post. One part of this is actually a really bullish Tesla rumor because the IRS now officially lists the Tesla Cybertruck all-wheel drive as eligible for the full $7,500 EV tax credit. Okay, we knew about that. But what's weird is that they also say the $100,000 Cyberbeast is eligible. But Sawyer says, I'm guessing what they mean is if the price in the future drops below $80,000, then it will qualify. In other words, why would you even put the Cyberbeast trim on that list there? If the Cyberbeast price comes down by $20,000, that means the cheaper all-wheel drive model would also come down by a significant amount, and the same will probably be true for the rear-wheel drive model as well. In other words, the demand for the Cybertruck would explode even further. And if this somehow turns out to be true, then it also sends a strong signal that if prices do not drop, then the margins are going to be insanely high. Of course, all of this is just speculation, and there's no guarantee that any of this will ever happen, but Tesla has given us a reason that is strong enough for us to believe that there is a possibility that it will happen. Yeah, my personal prediction is that eventually the Cybertruck prices will certainly come down. Now, you can also make an argument that the government here is just listing every single possible trim that would be eligible for the tax credit if the prices ever come down. However, you do not see that with all other vehicles. Ford F-150 Lightning has one trim that is above $80,000, and you don't see that platinum trim listed on the government website. It seems a bit random which companies have many trims per vehicle and which companies just have one model and then it just lists the MSRP limit. I'm not exactly sure why that is, but it seems like that is within the manufacturer's control, although it could also be that it's all based on where the batteries come from. So if that same model has different trims and each trim has different batteries from different sources, maybe then you see this basically. I'm not entirely sure, which is why possibly this could be quite bullish. For Zetsas, you're seeing a lot more of these type of comments on YouTube Cybertruck videos. We have one of them at the Tesla store in the mall near our house now. It looks way better than expected in person. The proportions don't look right in photos, but when you are right next to it, it looks slick. Changed my opinion on it for the better. Was roped off though, couldn't look inside. That does seem to be the common theme. Everyone who didn't like the Cybertruck all that much really, or even disliked it, They see it in person and all of a sudden they start to like it. I guess if you see a low resolution photo of the Cybertruck, it doesn't look all that great. But I have seen 4K videos of the Cybertruck, and to me, in person, it looked exactly the same as I envisioned it. Sawyer just took a shot at Troy. It's a relatively friendly argument, but there's a bit of drama going on here. Troy basically said it's not about the looks of the Cybertruck, it's about pedestrian and cyclist safety, including when the vehicle is parked. So he did this poll: should Tesla release a new version of the Cybertruck in the future with rounded corners and edges? And only 20% of the people says yes, that would be good, and that's where Sawyer takes a shot at Troy by saying the future should look like the past. And that's where Sawyer would argue the Cybertruck's lower and sloped front end makes it much safer than, for example, the new F350, which is basically a wall on wheels. I'm pretty tall. I'm a little bit over 6 feet tall, but I feel like this thing would hit my chest. I would probably be dead. But Troy points out that he's talking about when the vehicle is parked. Could the corners pose a risk in scenarios like these? For instance, people playing basketball nearby, walking while distracting on their phone, someone bending down to grab stuff for the truck bed. Jason Camisa, who spent 3 days with the Cybertruck, he actually said that he cut his hand open during his time with the Cybertruck. And what I think would be good is to not necessarily change the look of the Cybertruck, just leave it the same, but just make edges not super sharp. I do not want something like this, but I do want something like this. You cannot actually cut yourself with this stable. It looks like it has a somewhat sharp edge, but when you actually touch it, when you feel it, there's no way you will cut yourself with this. Bloomberg reports that now there are 29 million EVs on the roads in the whole world, which is up from 6.8 million EVs in 2020. That's a lot of progress, and that's happening really fast, and this will only continue to accelerate. Japan is actually a huge auto market, but you don't even see Japan here. But eventually every single country will switch to EVs. And the absolute best moment will be when Tesla bears will start switching to EVs themselves. And there are a few legacy automakers that are making a serious attempt at transitioning to EVs. For example, you can see here that Volvo, about 27% of their sales are EVs, and Mercedes is about 20%, BMW is a bit higher at 23%. That's actually pretty significant. However, after looking at this right here, you will realize that this chart is a bunch of nonsense because they are including plug-in hybrids. The actual number for BMW is 14.1%, so it's okay, but nowhere near as impressive as 23%. And I feel like this is a bit misleading. The IRA has already attracted over $100 billion of EV investment in North America. That's a really good headline for politicians because it assumes that zero investments would have been made if there were no incentives. Surely, more investments have been made because there are incentives from the government, but that number would not have been zero, so I don't think it is very fair to say that the government's policy attracted $100 billion to be invested in North America for battery manufacturing, EV manufacturing, etc. But yeah, a good portion of it has been. And look at how fast charging speeds have increased. The average max charging power of a BEV launched in 2023 was 186 kilowatts, 25% higher than the average of models launched in 2022. 25% in one single year. Do you guys understand how big of a difference this is? Because Tesla bears do not. I will do some oversimplified math right now. Let's say that on average it takes 30 minutes to charge your battery electric vehicle to a level that you are happy with right now at a supercharger. Okay, again, I'm oversimplifying here, but let's say every year, the time to charge is reduced by 25%. So next year is going to take you 22 minutes. A year after that, 16.8 minutes. And then in just a few more years, you are down to 5 minutes. In about 7 years, you are down to 4 minutes, which is crazy. Now, I don't assume that every single year charging speeds will get 25% shorter. You can read my note and do more accurate math, but it is abundantly clear that charging speeds will continue to improve. I'm telling you guys, charging speeds in the future, a decade from now, will not be an issue. Even those people that live in apartments will be able to comfortably and quickly charge at a supercharger. There will be no difference pretty much between owning a gas vehicle and an electric vehicle in terms of how fast it takes to refuel or recharge. And on top of that, the EVs will be so much cheaper, so only complete idiots will buy gas-powered cars at that point. So in reality, anyone who does buy a gas-powered vehicle in the future will only do so for sentimental reasons. Oh, you can now buy a Starlink starter kit if you go to Costco, so you don't even need to order online. If your internet sucks, I highly recommend switching to Starlink. We have one ourselves and it works great. Oh, there's another Tesla recall, says for Zod, but actually it is for Stellantis, specifically for Ram. If you didn't know, Stellantis and Tesla share a very similar stock ticker. It's pretty easy to mix these up if you are in a rush. Actually, maybe it's a bit difficult to mix them up because even Tesla bears don't do that. I think us Tesla stock investors should be aware of this Cybertruck halo effect. Gary says, I was in the Chicago Rivian store yesterday, a block from a Tesla store. One of the employees told me their walk-in traffic was way up since the Tesla Cybertruck display went up before the kickoff. Interestingly, Tesla moved the Cybertruck out of the Chicago store yesterday to another store. Needless to say, the Tesla store was empty, Gary says. But I think the main reason why you're buying a Rivian right now is because you just cannot get a Cybertruck in time, or you just really don't like how the Cybertruck looks. Here's some good Cybertruck news. A former tennis player has been seen in a Cybertruck, and it's a story that's big enough for the mainstream media to actually pick it up. It is definitely not a story when a celebrity buys a Rolls Royce or a Ferrari or a Lamborghini, but it will be a story perhaps pretty much almost every time when a celebrity will be seen driving a Cybertruck. That will bring so much attention to the Cybertruck. And Sawyer has given us a pretty good update here. Out of the 200 people that have directly messaged Sawyer so far with proof that Tesla invited them to configure a Foundation Series Cybertruck, about 60% of those have decided to actually go through and order it. Seems like an even split between all-wheel drive and Cyberbeast Foundation. And this is actually pretty bullish in the long term for Tesla. Jeff says he has close relatives in town from California. They are in the market for a new car and they want it to be an EV. Both are very intelligent people with the latest computers, mobile phones, and on social media, including X. They didn't even attempt to go to Tesla's website because they thought they all start over $50,000. No idea on new starting price in the 30s. Intent is bringing down price into the 20s, possibly gas savings, net of charging costs, etc. The good news is we are close to ordering their first Tesla. That's great. Ian Matt Smith says, I have come across this misconception many times. Seems to me that there is a mountain of anecdotal evidence that a variance could be better. At some point, the evidence is no longer just anecdotal. In other words, Tesla has not tapped into this big market of people that have no clue about what the price of Teslas are. And someone's family still thinks that they start around $80,000, even though she tells them they do not. They are convinced there's a catch. I somehow totally missed this one. Late Friday, NASDAQ announced that Lucid would be removed from the NASDAQ 100 index effective prior to the market open on December 18th. At this pace, the company eventually will be taken private and then bankruptcy will be declared. The odds are against Lucid and the CEO is no Elon Musk. This will be reassuring to many Tesla stock investors because Elon is probably less likely to sell Tesla stock if X keeps growing, which it is. Elon says we are seeing rapid growth. And CNBC just did a minute documentary about the Cybertruck. Here are some key interesting highlights.
In the 4 years since its debut, the Cybertruck has had a long and arduous road to production. Internal documents revealed how delayed the development of the truck was in 2022.
Tesla had planned to have this vehicle start production in 2021. That didn't happen. They have talked about the pandemic and wars that disrupted supply chain and more. That's legitimate, but they were also still working out kinks with how to manufacture this.
So not only was Tesla pretty much the only company that was able to extremely successfully navigate that chip shortage, it also had more time to work on the Cybertruck, which it also benefited from.
When we're reinventing a product, sometimes we have to go through these processes just to prove it out. We had this idea that making an exoskeleton vehicle could work, and so we've been using that time to make sure that that actually is working.
In other words, Tesla has fully proven the Cybertruck concept by now.
The design, at least, finally is locked. We got too carried away.
Nearly a year later, Tesla built its first Cybertruck at its Austin Gigafactory.
This is more than 90% different, right? So that means you really have to reinvent the process. Actually, they did. They did a great job putting this together in such a short period of time. Say, automotive industry, traditionally, all the cars, no fundamental difference except stock. The overall platform is essentially the same because they all borrow or learn from the past. So you don't have to reinvent new tooling and new assembly sequence.
So we actually had to come up with a special, ultra-strong, Tesla-designed steel alloy. This metal did not exist before. We needed something that you could actually manufacture, but have basically no corrosion, didn't need paint, but you can still make it in volume.
Their vice president of materials engineering, Charles Kuhlmann, works for two Elon companies in this capacity. He worked for SpaceX and Tesla, and they've collaborated on alloys before.
For example, the knowledge that SpaceX had about metals greatly helped Tesla to build first gigacastings.
Steel isn't uncommon in automotive. It's frequently used in panels and frames as part of the vehicle's structure. But Tesla's custom ultra-hard stainless steel could have added some unique challenges.
Stainless steel is hard to work with. It's much, much, much harder than all of the grades of conventional steel, which is what the bulk of vehicles today are made out of, including Tesla's high-volume Model 3 and Model Y.
The presses that they needed were very unique presses, massive presses, and that is where a lot of the money would go. And you can't use these presses forever because they start to wear out.
But for automotive, using complete body panel with a stainless steel is a new concept.
Tesla had to invent a manufacturing process called air bending, which shapes the steel with high air pressure without actually touching the surface.
When you bend a piece of metal, you want to maintain certain shape, and the stainless steel tend to be more unpredictable than traditional steel. And if you get into higher strength level, they tend to be amplified.
When they produce the panel, it will actually press it further than where it has to go because the steel will spring back. Sometimes it's this much, sometimes it's that much. So you never know. That's where you can get these quality issues.
And yet, despite of that, the Cybertruck that I checked out had pretty much near perfect build quality. It just goes to show you how capable and effective Tesla is.
Stainless steel is very difficult to work with. When you cut it, all the mistakes basically show up. When you have a flat plane like that, it's really hard to hide the mistakes.
Tesla has been using gigacasting.
The primary benefit essentially is a cost and parts complexity benefit, right? You can cast a larger proportion of the vehicle at one time, less complexity, less assembly, less cost.
You can ensure uniformity for automotive industry, mass-produced products. That's very critical.
The problem is that if anything goes wrong, even in the manufacturing process, now you have to scrap a huge piece.
There was at one point a photo of an entire parking lot full of failed gigacastings. That's part of the development process, but still, can they get all of these new and innovative processes up and running simultaneously in volume?
Which one is harder? Making the first mass-produced EV ever, or making the Cybertruck? I think making the first ever mass-produced EV was quite a lot more difficult than making the Cybertruck. So I think Tesla will knock it out at the park eventually. We could have some serious hurdles, but Tesla will make it work eventually.
Service at Tesla has been a sticking point for a number of years. When you have a new manufacturing process like gigacasting for the Cybertruck, that adds another layer of complexity to the servicing piece.
The moment you scratch a vehicle like this, which you can scratch it and you can dent it, you're going to have a hard time fixing that car. And in that sense, it's going to be even more expensive in terms of maintenance.
But you can take a sledgehammer, hit the Cybertruck with it as hard as you possibly can, and still there's no dent at all. So I think however much money you'll need to spend on fixing the Cybertruck, if you ever need to fix the dents, you will save a lot of money just by not having to fix all of the other dents that otherwise you would have had to fix.
I think it's our best product. I think it's the most unique thing on the road. And finally, the future will look like the future.
Please bless the YouTube algorithm god by clicking the like button and subscribing to this channel, especially if you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in tomorrow's episode. Thank you so much for watching.